Welcome to the Metropolitan Police. This is Bernard Hogan, Hale, the Commissioner. An operator will be with you as soon as possible. If your call is an emergency, please hang up and redial 999. Please note your call may be recorded.
Your call will be answered by our operators who answer calls for all police stations across London. Metropolitan Police, what's your reason for calling?
Hello, can I speak to DCS Mick Duffy, please?
Where is he based?
Scotland Yard, I believe.
Mick Duffy?
D-U-T-H-I-E.
And what's this in regards to?
It's a confidential matter.
Your name?
My name's Richard Hall.
And you're calling from where, please?
I'm calling from South Wales.
Are you calling from a business or?
Just a member of the public. It's a
Right, but I can't just pass someone through to a detective chief who's superintendent on the fact that you're calling from South Wales and it's a confidential matter. He's a very high up member of the Metropolitan Police, right. And I need to know a reason as to why you need to speak to him directly.
I have some evidence for something that he's in charge of investigating.
Right, what's he in charge of investigating?
He's in charge of investigating the Madeleine McCann case.
Just bear with me, I'll see if I can get through to him.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, can I help you?
Hello, is that Detective Chief Superintendent McDuffie?
No, it's not, I'm afraid. I'm his staff officer. He's out of the office. He's away from London at the moment.
All right, okay. It's just in connection with the Madeleine McCann case. He was quoted as saying that there's the possibility that they will find Madeleine McCann alive. I just wanted to inform him that I've done quite a lot of investigating and research myself into this case. And are you or he aware of the cadaver dog evidence, the two dogs that searched the McCann's apartment and detected the past presence of a human corpse behind the sofa in the McCann's apartment and in the McCann's bedroom and on Kate McCann's clothes? Is he aware of that evidence? That the cadaverine odour was detected in the McCann's apartment, suggesting that a corpse had been there?
I couldn't possibly comment, sir.
Okay. Could you take a note of my website where a lot of this is actually in video form? I've actually made 11 hours of documentary about the case. It's madelinefilms.net.
Can you spell that for me, please?
M-A-D
Yep.
E-L E-I-N-E
Yep.
then films, all one word, .net.
Okay.
So are you aware that the cadaver dogs searched the McCann's apartment and detected cadaver odour?
I've got nothing to do with the inquiry whatsoever, sir.
Right, okay.
It's not for me to comment.
All right, well, if you could pass that on to him, I'd be very grateful.
Can I take your contact details?
Say again? Yeah.
Can I take your contact
Yeah,
details?
sure. My name's Richard Hall.
Yeah.
My mobile number is...
Okay, sir.
All
I'll
right.
pass it on to him when he's next in the office.
Thanks very much indeed now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Good morning, everybody. I just flew in yesterday, so if I sound a little spaced out at times, I do apologise. To a certain extent, I have some of the media on our side already, but we still have to be creative. We still have to be intelligent about what we put out there and when we put out there. Why did we get the likes of David Beckham coming in to support us very early on? Why did we get certain newspapers, News of the World, no longer exists? That's another story, I'll tell you about that separately. The younger the child, the bigger the story is. Photogenic child on holiday, the mystery of how come she could be taken from her bedroom on that night of May the 3rd. That mystery remains unsolved to this day. We, people who have been close to it, genuinely do not know what's happened. There is no evidence to suggest he has come to physical harm. There is no evidence to suggest he has there is no evidence to suggest he has there is no evidence to suggest he has come to physical harm. that they somehow were allegedly involved. They are not. I state that categorically from the outset. They've been examined by at least 4 different law enforcement agencies. There was no question of them involved beyond the fact that they took a decision to dine some distance from the apartment on the night with their friends constantly checking. They might, I should add, they could have had, if they'd been able to have, a professional nanny service, which wasn't available at the time, it wouldn't have checked as frequently as they were checking with their friends. As Miranda said, I went out originally as a civil servant for the Cabinet Office, so I was there as a neutral to help them with, as part of the consular package of consular assistance that is given. If you lose your passport abroad, you can go to your consul, your embassy, and you can get assistance. We had Portuguese pride and cultural differences. Why do these crazy Brits want to put their children to bed at 7:30 at night? They should be out with us at the table having wine till midnight. That's just how it is. And of course we have the forum debate, the multiplier effect of the wonderful joys of the blogosphere. We all blog. I'm sure I'm looking at many, many bloggers here today. Absolutely fine. Blogging is, in fact, a fantastic innovation, but in the wrong hands, with people who have a set of preconceived notions and prejudices, it can be just as destructive as sitting in a mainstream newspaper. So we had to deal with that and the constant monitoring of that. There are still 2 or 3 anti-McCann forums in existence to this day. Who still rail against the situation. They are all wrong, I might add. But essentially I had to sit down with Kate and Jerry at different times and say, right, we've got to define our central theme here, we've got to define our core messages, our key messages. You need to stick to them in the interviews that we're doing. I will stick to them in the public communications that I'm performing. And essentially the focus was always trying to bring it back to finding Madeleine. John Corner, a godparent at Madeleine's in Liverpool, he was already pumping out high-definition video material of Madeleine from previous birthday parties and family events, even before the Portuguese authorities had confirmed that she was missing. There was so much material on Madeleine coming into the BBC central newsroom, into the hub that brings in all the social media, the user-generated content, as they like to call it, that the BBC actually had to tell the family to stop sending us this stuff. Who is this girl? We don't even know her. And it was only later that morning that finally, grudgingly, confirmation came out from Portugal that yes, police were looking at this and that a British child had gone missing. We had to maintain momentum throughout all this. As I say, we had to keep bringing it back to the search. It was always about this witness appeal, this sighting, this piece of information, not... We established a website for Madeleine very quickly. That's still there, still running to this day. It acted as a portal for information tip-offs, sightings. And journalists who were coming to it cold would have just done a quick Google search, read whatever it was in either indigenous media or international, and that was the truth in their eyes. It just isn't the case. So we had to keep constantly putting things in context and explaining it. Evening Standard in London, police name McCann's as top suspects. What's a top suspect? A middle suspect? A bottom suspect? Again, it's hype, it's hyperbole, and all it was that they were given this R.I.R.A status, which in reality meant that they, if they wanted to, could have a lawyer present with the interviews that were being done. Kate, at one point, was advised, having done 4 interviews where all the questions were answered, she was advised finally on the 5th time with this status not to answer anymore because you've answered it several times already and you don't need to incriminate yourself, because it was clear that certain officers were beginning to go down that route without any evidence. So to this day, it's held against her online. Why didn't she answer all these questions in that interview? They never realised that she'd already answered them 4 times in previous interviews without a lawyer present. We had to occasionally threaten legal sanction with some of the denials because some of the allegations were so lurid and so wild that if we didn't, it would have entered the narrative to the extent that we wouldn't have been able to claw it back. My role requires tact, diplomacy and absolute common sense and being utterly straight with the media. If you're straight with the media, generally they will be straight with you. Various ITV strands, BBC strands and Hello campaign in Britain we did for the first anniversary. We did Oprah Winfrey in Chicago. The Americans very concerned about the story, even though they accept she probably isn't in America. But nevertheless, there's still American traffic there. We have an ongoing relationship with Crime Watch, which is the major criminal investigative program which works very closely with the Met in Britain, and if the Met want to do something for Operation Grange, they'll use Crime Watch as their vehicle of choice, and Kate and Jerry are very happy to do interviews for that. They tend not to want to do wider interviews these days because they've done so many. And we have monitoring continuously online of the various flora and fauna, online, some of which is none too pleasant. And we have a team of online supporters who help us with the monitoring as well, a number of women who are very concerned about Madeleine in America. We had a trip to meet the Pope, the then Pope, Pope Benedict, just in the first few months, very soon after she went missing, partly because I was told privately that the Holy Father himself was watching it on television. And we were able to organise an audience with the Pope, which meant a great deal to them. We have legal action continuing against a particular former Portuguese police officer, Mr. R.I.R.A, who wrote a very unpleasant book. Alleging, in essence, that Kate and Jerry know what happened. They've covered up the truth since then. It's just not true. It's fundamentally untrue. And therefore, ergo defamatory. Going through the Portuguese courts at the moment, it's a very slow process, but that is still ongoing. And again, there is a certain amount of attendant media around that needs to be controlled and managed.
Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. That was media manipulator Clarence Mitchell there, winning a prize for the sheer rate of lies coming out of his mouth. Now, I often get asked if I'm going to put out more Madeleine McCann material, and today I'm going to do just that.
I would like to emphasise that I strongly believe in freedom of speech. But where you have people who are repeatedly carrying out inaccuracies and have been shown to do so, then they should be held to account. That is the issue. I don't have a problem somebody purporting a theory.
What follows is merely a purported theory, and everything I am about to purport is just an opinion. This theory is based purely on circumstantial evidence, which does not prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. Does not prove anything beyond reasonable doubt. I'm going to look at a new angle which I have not explored before in my films. I'm not suggesting what follows is the answer to the case. I am putting it out as a hypothesis for people to comment on and to see if any evidence surfaces which might support it or indeed contradict it. If you've watched my films, you will have seen that a lot has been established regarding the Madeleine McCann cover-up. Let me list what I believe the films have established so far. 1. Madeleine McCann died in the McCann's apartment. 2. The death was probably unintentional. 3. She died 3 to 4 days before she was reported missing. 4. Her body was concealed and then disposed of and is unlikely to be found. 5. An abduction story was concocted to conceal the death. 6. High-level UK authorities assisted with the cover-up. If you need convincing of any of these points, please watch the many hours of documentaries and interviews I have produced at madelinefilms.net. To my mind, the major unanswered question is, what was the reason for the huge cover-up? Why was Madeleine's death concealed, and why were the McCanns protected by powerful UK government agencies? A number of suggestions have been put forward in the past. The popular theory that the McCanns, because they were middle-class doctors, must have had friends in high places is woolly and ambiguous and doesn't really explain anything at all. There is a catalogue of evidence which shows that UK security services and a host of other organisations were involved in a sophisticated cover-up, which means it goes further than simply having friends in high places. Gonçalo Amaral, who ran the Madeleine McCann investigation for the first 5 months, repeatedly asserted that British security services were involved. He said in an interview that after the 2 British police dogs had been used to search the McCann's apartment at the Ocean Club, his team took the British person who was responsible for the dog searches to Faro Airport. This would have been either Mark Harrison or Martin Grime. Amaral stated that when he was waiting for his plane to return to England, he received a phone call informing him that a member of MI5 was at the airport waiting to talk with him about the result of the dog investigation. We also know that a company called Control Risks Group, which has links to MI5 and is part funded by the government, was in Portugal within days of Madeleine being reported missing. They coached Jane Tanner into a bogus identification of Robert Murat as Madeleine's alleged abductor. Later, she admitted she had been mistaken. We know that the McCann's friend and benefactor, Cheshire multimillionaire Brian Kennedy, appointed the head of covert intelligence at MI5, Henry Exton, as one of his private investigators. Moreover, we know that when the McCanns travelled back to England 2 days after they were made formal suspects, a special branch officer met them at East Midlands Airport. Because UK security services were heavily involved, there must have been an important reason for this. That reason would most likely have had something to do with national security. Popular theories for a high-level cover-up include 1. To protect a British-led paedophile ring or a high-up person within such a ring which may have been operating in Portugal. 2. To protect a pharmaceutical company that was involved in allowing Madeleine to use an experimental drug that contributed to her death. Or 3. To maintain secrecy of a clandestine medical project Madeleine was being used for, possibly involving genetics. As my films have shown, there are numerous references to paedophilia within the McCann's own story. Gerry McCann was quick to suggest a paedophile might have abducted Madeleine. There are statements made by doctor friends of the McCanns who state that on a previous holiday, Gerry's friend David Payne asked Gerry if Madeleine would do this. Whilst he said, "do this," he was sucking his index finger on one hand while circling his nipple with a finger on his other hand. There is the visit made by the McCanns to Clement Freud's house in Praia de Luz shortly after the reported disappearance. Just months after Madeleine's reported disappearance, Kate and Gerry spent a day with the late R.I.R.A, a self-appointed sex therapist who in a Daily Telegraph article said Madeleine must have been abducted by a paedophile. Let's not forget also those disturbing photographs that the McCanns put out. My own opinion on the paedophile issue is that paedophilia might be a symptom of an intelligence cover-up rather than the reason for an intelligence cover-up. Let me explain what I mean. Although hardly ever reported in mainstream media, one way that security services create assets, and by asset I mean a person who is secretly working for them, essentially a spy, is to recruit people who they have evidence against. If you work for us, we will forget about your previous crimes. If you ever speak about your role, you know we have this evidence and we will use it against you. Recruits can be trusted not to disclose details of whatever project they are assigned to, because of course they do not want to face being exposed, in some cases as a child abuser. In 2015, I gave a lecture where I asked the question, were the McCanns, or one of the McCanns, known to the security services before their 2007 holiday? You can watch that lecture from this link. Let's imagine that Jerry McCann, or both Kate and Jerry, were recruited by security services sometime well before their 2007 holiday and were working as security service assets on a project connected to national security. Is it possible that the unexpected death of Madeleine and subsequent cover-up was to do with concealing details of that project? Is the spectre of paedophilia a symptom of intelligence assets rather than the reason for a cover-up itself? If Madeleine died due to the McCann's negligence, did security services protect their assets from prosecution in Portugal because they did not want them revealing details of a secret operation in a Portuguese court? And secondly, did they protect their assets because MI5 themselves were the reason why their assets were in Portugal in the first place, and hence had some responsibility for what happened to Madeleine? Was the abduction a plan hatched in London? Articles appeared recently in Portuguese media about claims that in 2007 Kate McCann was working for MI5. UK mainstream media were very quick off the mark to try and debunk such claims. I think we should also consider at this point the comment made by Jerry McCann while on his way to get on the plane before that fateful holiday.
Hang on. I think we're on video. We're still on video, don't worry. We can get everyone in. Cheer up, Jerry, we're on holiday.
Fuck off, I'm not here to enjoy myself. To me, this is an indication that the holiday involved work rather than enjoyment. If it did involve work, was the holiday itself a cover for the work, which was secret? I am going to digress from the Madeleine case now to explain about other things that were happening in the Algarve not far from Praia de Luz before, during and after the McCanns' 2007 trip to Portugal. Please bear with me while I explain all of this. It will become clear shortly. The Northern Ireland conflict between the UK and Irish Republicans in 2007 was and still is a major issue of national security for the British government. A peace agreement called the Good Friday Agreement was made back in 1998, and since then violence has greatly reduced. Despite the Good Friday Agreement, since 1998, MI5's covert operations have continued. Some of these operations have involved trying to prevent weapons reaching the real R.I.R.A. in Ireland. This Daily Telegraph article from June 2010 states, real R.I.R.A. commander caught in MI5 arms dealing sting. A real R.I.R.A. commander has been convicted of attempting to smuggle weapons and explosives into Northern Ireland after being snared by a daring MI5 sting operation. Paul McCafferty, 43, was caught trying to buy an arsenal of weapons from an undercover agent posing as a Middle Eastern arms dealer. The security service agent known as Ali spent 2 years meeting McCafferty and bugging 90 hours of conversations, which became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case at Belfast Crown Court. McCafferty of Lurgan, County Armagh, was convicted by Mr Justice Hart, presiding over the non-jury trial, who said the case against the Republican dissident was extremely compelling. The judge described the MI5 operation as an elaborate and successful one in which Agent Ali had skillfully and convincingly played the role of an arms dealer. It was the first time in 20 years that MI5 agents had given evidence in a court in Belfast. The judge said McCafferty was one of a group of terrorists determined to buy arms and explosives to carry out attacks on members of the security forces in Northern Ireland. The evidence included tapes recorded between 2004 and 2006 in which McCafferty described himself as deputy commander of the real R.I.R.A. and asked for equipment including armour-piercing weapons and plastic explosive. The trial had heard that the real R.I.R.A. was using a restaurant on the Algarve in Portugal as a global hub for weapons shipment to Ireland. McCafferty met the agent in Portugal and in a number of other locations, including Amsterdam and Istanbul. He agreed to pay £87,000 for 100 kilograms of explosives, detonators and cords, 20 AK-47 assault rifles, 20 rocket-propelled grenade launchers, 10 sniper rifles and 20 pistols with silencers. No weapons or explosives ever changed hands. McCafferty bought a small house in the south of France to store the weapons before they were to be moved to Ireland, and the real R.I.R.A. also had a purpose-built trailer to take the weapons from Portugal to the safe house in France. He is said to have told the agents his organisation had made the bomb used in Omar, but had given it to others who had screwed it up. He also said that police in Northern Ireland left the back doors of their Land Rovers open during the summer, and he would target them by tossing grenades inside. A second defendant, Dermot Declan Gregory, was convicted of buying the restaurant with the intention of selling it off and giving the proceeds to the real R.I.R.A. Charges against a third man, Desmond Kearns, were thrown out 2 weeks ago after the trial judge ruled the case against him amounted to entrapment by another MI5 agent codenamed Amir. McCafferty and 41-year-old Gregory of Crossmaglen, County Armagh, will be sentenced at a later date. As an aside here, just to be fair, although this is being reported as genuine attempts to stop real R.I.R.A. arms smuggling, I think I need to highlight that one suspect had charges dropped due to the case amounting to entrapment by MI5. So we can't be sure how real these real R.I.R.A. men were. Were they all being coaxed into something, or were they 100% terrorists? Perhaps a bit of both, but let's continue. Now, this article in the Portugal News Online from the 15th of November 2012 talks about another weapons trafficking case. Again, according to the article, members of the real R.I.R.A. were caught planning to smuggle weapons from the Algarve to Ireland. In the article, it speaks about the previous 2009 case that I just discussed and gives more detail. It is not the first time R.I.R.A. activity has been exposed in the Algarve. In 2009, two men believed to belong to the real R.I.R.A. were found to be using a restaurant in the small fishing village of Alvor as a main European base. It was at the Panda Grill on the fringe of the village that Paul Anthony McCafferty and Michael Gregory allegedly negotiated the buying and selling of weapons for the real R.I.R.A. between 2005 and 2006. They are also believed to have done business in the Algarve, including a property transaction to the sum of €46,000 to finance real R.I.R.A. terrorist activity. Now, Alvor is located just a few kilometres to the east of Praia de Luz, where the McCanns stayed. If we consider the time frame, according to the articles, the arms smugglers were found out in 2009, but had been planning well before that date and were covertly recorded by MI5 between 2004 and 2006. They weren't charged until 2009, which means in 2007, MI5 still did not have enough evidence to secure an arrest. And that means these suspects were still under observation in 2007. So, we know MI5 were running covert surveillance operations in the Algarve in 2007, not far from where the McCanns stayed. So what, you might think? Let's look at some more Northern Ireland connections to the Madeleine McCann case. One city which was severely affected by the Troubles in Ireland is Derry. Jerry McCann has Irish family from St Johnston village in County Donegal, which is 7 miles southwest of Derry and lies in the Irish Republic, just yards from the Northern Ireland border. You may recall that Madeleine and the McCanns visited St Johnston village shortly before their 2007 holiday, where the famous ice cream photograph was taken. This article, written in 2007, explains that Jerry McCann's father, Johnny, and uncle Huey used to run a pub in St Johnstone Village in the 1960s before Johnny moved to Scotland. According to the current owner of the former McCann pub, the McCanns were still regular visitors to the area in 2007, but interestingly no longer had relatives in Donegal. Now, another link to Northern Ireland in relation to the Madeleine McCann cover-up is a certain Mr. Jim Gamble. Jim Gamble was a Northern Ireland police officer who rose quickly through the ranks to become the head of Northern Ireland's anti-terrorist intelligence unit in Belfast. From there, he somehow became involved in Operation R.I.R.A. This was a police investigation which started in 1999, intended to prosecute thousands of users of a child pornography website following information received from US law enforcement. If they've got a list of 7,000 British paedophiles, the first people who are going to look at that list are intelligence officers like Jim Gamble, to see which of the 7,000 might make good agents. After Operation R.I.R.A., he became the chief executive of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre. His role there was to use the internet to search for online paedophiles. Why does someone who was head of Northern Ireland's anti-terror intelligence gathering start searching for paedophiles? Quite simply because people who abuse children can be used to gather intelligence, as I explained earlier. Therefore, while working at CEOP, I suspect Gamble was probably still involved in anti-terror or other intelligence gathering activities. It's also clear that Gamble was involved in the Madeleine McCann cover-up before Madeleine's disappearance was even made public. This is all explained in my series of Madeleine McCann films. Jim Gamble was responsible for creating this website page, which is an appeal to help find Madeleine. Two US Madeleine researchers using the Internet Archive website Wayback Machine to investigate the history of the CEOP website said they had found a record of CEOP setting up a dummy page for Madeleine McCann on their website dated the 30th of April 2007. This is the day after I suspect Madeleine died and 3 days before she was reported missing. If this could be proved, it confirms my theory that Madeleine died on the Sunday, triggering a frantic effort assisted by government agencies to plan a hoax abduction 4 days later. Digital forensic evidence suggests the page was probably created on the 30th of April 2007, 3 days before Madeleine disappeared. This and other evidence suggests to me that Jim Gamble was briefed about Madeleine's death immediately after it occurred, probably on the 29th of April, and acted quickly to assist the cover-up by producing this web page on the 30th of April, which was intended to be made live shortly after the disappearance was publicly declared. So, is the reason Jim Gamble had such a close connection to the McCann case because the case was connected to intelligence gathering? Intelligence gathering on R.I.R.A suspects or patsies who were operating near Praia de Luz in 2007. Is it possible that the hidden reason for the holiday was because Jerry or Kate or both were agents working in some capacity for the intelligence operation which was surveilling R.I.R.A suspects? That seems far-fetched, you might think. Well, just consider it for a moment. If this was happening, what might have been their role? How about being used as spotters? A group of families on holiday with their young children would not be suspected of being British agents. Were the McCanns being used as spotters to identify or record R.I.R.A suspects? Suspects who we know were, according to the articles, at large in 2007 in the village just up the road from where the McCanns were staying. The article I covered earlier said the real R.I.R.A. suspects were discussing arms deals at the Panda Grill restaurant in 2005 and 2006. What better way to monitor a place like a restaurant than by using a whole family or families as a cover? A family that had been recruited into this work, perhaps using a method like the one I described earlier. Remember Jerry's comment? Fuck off, I'm not here to enjoy myself. If this is what was going on, it could also explain the 3-day delay between Madeleine's death and the reporting to the local police of her disappearance. Perhaps there were things MI5 needed to do to secure their covert operation before allowing the Portuguese police to start a huge search for a supposedly missing child, a search which might have spooked their real R.I.R.A. suspects. It could also explain this.
We want to ask the public who have been out in the resort to provide us with photographs. We're asking anyone who's been in the Ocean Club Resort in the 2 weeks leading up to the disappearance of little Madeleine to provide us with their photographs. We don't want photographs of scenery. We don't want photographs simply of their family. We want the public to look at the photographs they've taken and consider who else is there in the background. If there are other individuals, we're not making judgments, send those photographs to us. If there's someone you think is behaving strangely in a strange place or in a strange way, send those photographs to us. Go to the special website madeleine.cupload.com. We will be able to access those images where they'll be used by our team here on a system called Childbase. We're able to process 1,000 images per hour, and the information that comes from that will help us assist the police in Portugal in the search that they're carrying out. If you're at home, if you have old-fashioned media, if you have an old-fashioned camera, if you've had a disposable camera whilst you've been on holiday, don't worry about that. We're being supported by a lot of people in the retail industry. Jessops have put special information online that you'll be able to access. It will tell you how to upload your images. If you go into one of their shops, they're prepared to give you advice with regards to how you upload those images. If you go into the shop with traditional film, they will transfer that onto a DVD disc for you for free so that you can provide us with that information.
Why did they want photographs up to 2 weeks before Madeleine was reported missing? The McCanns had been in Portugal for less than a week before they declared Madeleine missing. Therefore, what use would photographs of Praia de Luz be 1 week before the McCanns got there? Were they looking for someone in the background? Was Jim Gamble looking for something other than Madeleine's non-existent abductor in those photographs? Was he looking for real R.I.R.A. suspects? Real R.I.R.A. suspects or patsies who we know were operating in that region at that time? Or was he making sure there were no MI5 assets revealed in any of those photographs? Or was he looking for someone else, a politically important person perhaps? On the 9th of June 2007, Jerry McCann wrote this in his blog. After returning from the beach, we did the Irish version of Crime Watch, Crime Call. There are a lot of Irish tourists in and around Praia de Luz, and although the awareness of Madeleine's disappearance in Ireland is extremely high, we want to ensure that everyone is aware of the appeal, and we want the Irish public to come forward with photographs of people who they do not know who were in and around Praia de Luz in the 2 weeks leading up to the 3rd of May. Here is an anonymous internet post on this issue. In my opinion, Jim Gamble was not looking for photos of possible abductors. He was looking for photos that could have identified MI5 operatives. There is a trial scheduled to take place this month, April 2010, in regard to real R.I.R.A. activities in the Algarve. It may not have to do with that case. The other thing this theory would definitely explain is the enormous amount of help the McCanns had from British security services and other organisations which are connected to them. Let's not forget the Smith family. who claim they saw someone carrying a child on the night Madeleine was reported missing, were Irish. It appears to me, however, that there are some things this theory does not explain. It doesn't explain some of the important people who were staying at the Ocean Club during that week. For example, Philip Edmonds, director of steel company Stemcor, who bizarrely cut his holiday short and left the Algarve as soon as the Madeleine saga commenced. He then went on to claim that he had a photograph of Madeleine taken on the day she was reported missing, but he has to date never publicly produced this photograph, to my knowledge, which makes me suspect he is lying about the photograph and assisted those running the cover-up. Here is a list of some of the other high flyers who were staying near or at the Humble Ocean Club that week. I will also mention that around the time the Madeleine McCann affair kicked off, the 8th of May 2007, an agreement was signed between the UK government and the Irish political parties called the St Andrews Agreement. The agreement concerned devolving political powers from the UK to Northern Ireland. I don't know if this is relevant, but I thought I should mention it. If you have any observations, or better still, evidence that can shed light on anything I have discussed here, please get in touch. Now, one final thing before I leave you. There is a Madeleine research group who want to put Portuguese subtitles onto all of the Richplanet Madeleine films so they can be screened in Portugal. And they are looking for someone with editing skills and perhaps some knowledge of Portuguese. They will provide a document with the Portuguese text in it, and I can provide the films. So it's a case of working out which words go on the screen with which part of the film. If you're interested in helping the group and you think you can do that work, please get in touch with me, richard@richplanet.net. That's all for now. Remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night.